Hello and welcome to the NFU's Shed Talks podcast. I'm Bizza Walters and I'm joined by my co-host Luke Cox.
Hello everyone.
Coming up in our first ever episode, we speak to young farmers Hannah Jackson and Oliver Collingham about what it means to be resilient, professionally, personally and financially.
Just being completely honest with our business back at home, the farming side is really struggling. You know, it barely wipes its face. It's only because we're so passionate about it that we've been carrying on. Now that says we'll probably have to change a few things, but luckily we're so diverse, it's propping up the farming, which is our passion.
Yes.
Our team in Westminster lifts the lid on what's happening in politics and farming as the political parties host their annual conferences.
We go there because we are taking, again, as we always do, that voice of the farmer to the heart of policy and decision makers. We need to be in the room when those discussions are happening, and we need to make sure that the voice of the farmer is represented.
And now this is definitely something to hang around for. We've had an interview with a Californian cattle rancher whose farming community is being left hopeless and helpless by wolves. It's pretty frightening stuff.
Cattle are not built to be runners and to run from the wolf, so they eventually collapse. And then this is where it gets very graphic and unpleasant. But this is not like a mountain lion kill. A mountain lion will initially go for the neck and break the neck, so it's a quick, clean kill. And this is really weighing heavily emotionally, financially, and just the health of the people that take care of these animals too.
Actually, Luke, don't you think that we should introduce ourselves so listeners know who they're listening to? I'm Bizza and I'm an NFU member. We farm in Warwickshire, where my dad is third generation with his two brothers, my two uncles. We are predominantly sheep with a bit of arable and also some diversification businesses. I also have my own flock of sheep. They're all named and they are grey-faced Dartmoors. Brenda and Diane are regular features on my Instagram page, which is @BizzaWalters, should you want to give it a follow. Anyway, Luke, over to you. Tell me more about yourself.
Thanks, Bizza. I'm Luke Cox. I'm employed by the NFU, so I'm the staff lead for the combinable crop sector.
It's very
I'm
fancy.
also an arable farmer in Gloucestershire. My dad does most of the work there, which means that I can do this job. I don't really use social media, so good luck finding me.
So Luke, sorry to interrupt. Does this mean that you don't follow me on social media?
It probably does mean that I don't follow you,
I'm
Bizza.
so checking this afterwards.
But outside of farming, I really enjoy my sport. I'm a former tennis coach and football referee, which probably explains that I wasn't very good at actually playing any of them.
Well, Luke, let's hope that you are better at hosting podcasts than you are playing sport.
Right, enough about us. Let's take a look at what's caught our eye in the news. Bizza, one of the news stories that caught my eye recently was actually in the I newspaper, and their headline is how the UK could fall victim to what they are calling agro-terrorism, terrorism in agriculture. And their article, interestingly, is referring to illegal meat entering the country and unsolicited drone spraying. But we have huge range of rural crime here in the UK, and at the NFU we take it to the top of government through our lobbying work on issues such as livestock worrying and equipment theft. But it made me think about the cyber attacks we've had recently on Jaguar Land Rover, on airports, and specifically for us, supermarkets, and actually the impact that had on our farmers where produce went to waste. I think it's actually going to be a growing problem for our sector when we adopt more technology onto our farms through driverless tractors and precision farming. I think it could be a growing problem.
Luke, I think you're right there, and I'm sure listeners would agree with you. However, I have got a news story here for you that could combat all that. And that is that Sam Shoemaker, a Californian artist, and I read this in the Week magazine last week, has made a 26.4 mile sea crossing from Catalina Island to San Pedro, south of LA, in a kayak made entirely from mushrooms. He grew a fungus root network inside a fiberglass mould formed out of an old kayak and dried it to make a styrofoam-like material called aquafung. The journey passed without incident, with his boat fully intact. It's believed to be the world's longest open water journey in a mushroom-based kayak. Now, maybe this is a diversification option for farmers, and if, as you say, agro-terrorism does become more serious, we could look at making vehicles out of the stuff we grow. So there's the news for this week's episode. How about we now crack on with the rest of the show?
Bizza and I went to the latest Shed Talks Live, which was hosted in Nottingham by John Charles Jones on his stunning farm. And the focus of the Shed Talks was business resilience. It was a really relaxed environment. There was a stage at the front, which was a flatbed trailer where Tom Bradshaw as the host and the speakers could look out across the room full of dozens of farmers sat on straw bales, drinking a drink from the bar and eating the fantastic cheese toasties.
And don't forget the cocktails, Luke. They were very important.
They absolutely were. And the discussions we had were fantastic. Bizza, you were actually part of some of those discussions on stage, so we'll hear from you too. But to start with, we will hear from Hannah talking about coming into a male-dominated industry and the challenges she had to overcome. And you'll hear from the background noise, there's a real buzz in the room when we have this conversation.
Actually, Luke, I think we should just do a quick introduction to them both. Hannah is a first-generation tenant farmer from Cumbria. Her and her husband, with their 2 very small children, farm 400 sheep and also have lots of different diversification businesses. Oliver Collingham is a 4th-generation farmer from Nottinghamshire. He farms alongside his mum and dad, and they're mainly arable, but as with Hannah, also have some diversification.
Hannah, you've obviously come into what has certainly traditionally been a very male-dominated industry, and you made a point on stage about how you built trust over the years so that people listen to what you're saying. But it must have been a journey to get to that point. You must have had to overcome some fairly significant hurdles, I imagine, on that journey to get to a place where you are more comfortable now.
Yeah, definitely. I think sometimes I just shrug it off to go, oh, I've done this and this, and then was it easy? It's definitely had its ups and its downs. And yeah, when I first started, I had a lot of stereotypes to overcome. Then I took to social media to try and share the story. And I think as soon as you get into the limelight on social media, people's opinions is that you're out there for everyone to see, so you should be able to put up with the horribleness. It's like, I don't understand where we lost our humanity for people sometimes. Like, just because someone shares their life doesn't mean they're then open for you just to be really horrible for no reason.
I think that imposter syndrome is something to embrace, because when people say they're not nervous about whether it's speaking publicly or representing their business or doing something important, that's a sort of frightening thing to me, because often those sort of social anxieties come from how much you care about what you're doing. So that imposter syndrome, I also experience it in varying, probably different forms to yourself, because I've got a slightly different route into farming. But they're sort of good nerves, because I care about who I'm representing, whether that's the industry, the community, or my own family business.
You've clearly both been on a journey to become more resilient, and you've got sort of skills and techniques that you use yourselves. How can you and other resilient people support others who are perhaps less resilient in the industry when we're in such difficult times?
I think it's making sure that the conversation is as open as possible, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I always say, like, to make it easy for people to understand, I always say, like, it's as easy as you get out of bed and you decide what clothes you're picking that day. You make that conscious decision. So you wake up out of bed, and instead of thinking about your clothes, you think about what you're thinking about that's going to be good for that day. What you're happy for, what you're thankful for, what's going to go well today, what have you got to look forward to. If you start your day with that positivity in the first place, that sets the precedent for the whole day.
And my mum always taught us when we were little, you get up and you make your bed.
Make your bed.
Make your bed.
Yeah.
Because then you set up for the day, you're made up for the day.
Noted. Well, the wives are making it recently, but no,
Down as a make your bed kind of guy.
the biggest thing for me in terms of that resilience, we're all people, and openness is something that's actually, initially I was almost shamed for when I was younger for speaking openly about how I felt about things, whether that was emotionally or just sort of stress-based issues. But I learned, sort of getting into my 30s, it's a real strength. I don't seem to suffer from anxiety like some of my other family members, because I do speak openly, whether that might be annoying to the people around me or not. But getting those sort of issues out there. And amazingly, do you know, when you go and speak to your friends at whether it's a young farmers club or down the pub, most families have the same things going on.
I know,
it's just
crazy,
you feel on your own because people don't talk about these things. Just being completely honest, with our business back at home, the farming side is really struggling. It barely wipes its face. It's only because we're so passionate about it that we've been carrying on. Now that says we'll probably have to change a few things, but luckily we're so diverse, it's propping up the farming, which is our passion.
Yes.
And it was just interesting to hear you taking on a bigger risk by having a tenanted farm.
Yes.
I'm not having to rent my land.
Yeah.
And whether that actual farming side is actually paying, or whether everything else that you're doing is propping up that dream, which is the farming, and whether it's really covering its sort of self.
It will be covering itself to the point of it makes enough money, but not enough money to pay me and Dan to live. Like, we have so many different forms of diversification now. So we've got Dan's farrowing job, and he's full-time farrier with freight yards all over the place. We've got a pumpkin patch. We've got like my merch, my online stuff. Sunday Tam's best-selling book that give us a good turn. And we also, I didn't even say that, we train dogs at other farmers as well, and that brings in a really, really good income.
But that's so much to do just to live.
Yeah, and do you know what baffles me is that is that when you speak to anybody or speak to the government, they go, "Oh, just diversify." What
more can you do, though?
Say, yeah, but what other industry do they go? Oh, you have to just diversify if you want to carry on doing your job.
A really good point. Not every farm can do that. I mean, in Nottinghamshire, we're very lucky. We're close to a lot of population. We've got a good road network. We're relatively level land, and not a huge amount of the county is in greenbelt. So the options are far more varied than where you are, where you've had to really think outside the box. But that does require a hell of a lot of personality for the things that you've done, and not everybody has that confidence publicly.
Exactly. It doesn't work unless you've kind of built the community, I guess, already.
Yeah.
And what's that taken us 12 years to get to where I am now. So it's just not that easy, is it?
Ollie, you talked earlier about the fact that debt can be both a motivator and a burden on a business, because it does inspire you to do more and motivate you, but then it also can restrict the business.
My dad famously says that my granddad never borrowed any money and also couldn't sleep at night through the idea of ever having to borrow any money. And the more money my dad's borrowed, the easier he slept. Because you get used to it. But no, there's a very clear distinction between bad debt and good borrowing.
Yeah.
And everything that we've done in recent years, whether it's building a new shed and a storage yard project that I presented to the bank a few years ago, was all based on worst, average and best case scenarios. And even in the worst case scenarios, I believed I was going to cover my debt repayments. So that is good debt. That is money that we borrowed to progress and grow.
And it's being resilient, because you've got your good and your badges.
But at the same time, it wasn't. I was sort of confident enough in that side of the business to actually borrow over a fairly short period, wanting to know it'll be paid off before I'm 50, because I think that'd be quite cool, knowing that this new shed and yard are paid for.
So have a party in it.
Exactly, yeah. I'll have a party to celebrate the shed finally being paid. But no, I've spent a lot of time with a lot of other types of businesses. I went to a school where I was the only farmer in the whole school. I've come across a lot of people outside of the industry, and a lot of industries out there, the only way to grow is to borrow. And not everything has been perfect that we've borrowed on, but certainly my aspirations for our growth in the future will not work unless we do potentially borrow money. And that's just the nature of our business.
And we spoke about that, didn't we? The equality versus fairness.
Yes. Yeah.
When it comes to passing on farms and succession, right. You've got two siblings that you've spoken openly about.
Yeah.
And your dad said they will be left something fairly, but not necessarily equally.
Yes. And the great thing my parents have done over the last 20 years is to actually go without themselves by borrowing and buying property off the farm, so that we have assets that are sort of slightly more disposable with no sort of emotional attachment to them, so that in terms of sorting out my siblings in the future, there are considerable assets that won't affect the core business. And that's quite a rarity, actually. So hats off to my parents for doing that, because they've worked hard to grow their asset portfolio and certainly haven't improved their lifestyle in the meantime. So clearly they've been trying to plan this for quite a while. But I suppose the frustration now comes from having been in the business for 11 years and had good jobs prior to coming back. That my parents have also never really employed people or worked anywhere else, so don't really understand the idea of wage increases, bonuses or future projections.
What's that? Never heard of that.
Yeah,
one.
so you're sort of working on trust, and my trust isn't in my parents giving me exactly this and this. It's a trust in them being fair.
Yeah.
And I knew before I came home that my parents were fair people. They're my parents. I didn't ask what I was going to get paid, what I was going to drive and where I was going to live. But I also knew working with my parents that I'd be working with two bloody hard-working people that are fair on the whole.
You were doing it at the end of the day for you and your siblings.
It felt like that until recently. And now they've got a wife and two children.
Wow.
It changes your perspective.
Yeah.
And I'm now looking at my children thinking, what do I need to do to secure their future? And part of that is raising this conversation regularly with my parents, of which some days they're more receptive than others, but certainly versus other businesses, it does sound like my parents are certainly on the more receptive side.
Much better.
Hannah, you now have young children,
yeah,
and your ambition is to buy your own farm.
Yeah.
Do you think that's going to create succession issues for you further down the line? And have you thought about it? Does it worry you?
It doesn't tend to worry me that much because I sat around so many dinner tables now of farmers and we've kind of discussed it and had conversations with it that I feel like, due to our openness about everything anyway, in terms of whatever we want to talk about, I feel like it's something that we'll always just kind of plan for. But first, like, the biggest dream, I guess, is to complete the full circle and be able to buy the farm one day. Like, my biggest dream is to sit in generations to come as a little old woman in my chair and like listening to Blake and Jesse's like kids say, Nanny Hannah and Grandad Dan were the reason this all started, and this is where the generational farm started with them. So first I got to get there before I then have to worry about succession.
As we said earlier, you've all been on stage at Shed Talks today. So can you just conclude by sharing one new thing that you've learned from each other this afternoon?
I'm going to make it two things and be greedy. So it's been great listening to Hannah. The first thing is having that confidence to share what you're doing on social media. I've often cared a little bit too much about what people might think about me or how I'm representing the industry. But the more people that I see doing it and the more people I follow and seeing how well received they are by the public, it's clearly a fantastic thing when it's done well, and Hannah's been brilliant at it. And secondly, just amazing, obviously coming from a tenant perspective and an ownership perspective. You know, I am not an owner, I'm hoping to own. I just have a different route to it. And it's lovely to see the passion you have to be that sort of matriarchal kind of, this is the person that started it. Because in a way, although I'll be fourth or fifth generation, I'd love to think that my children will know that we've worked through some pretty hard farming times to make sure we're resilient enough to carry on, and it'd be an opportunity for them if they want it.
Mine's a little bit more pragmatic, to be fair. Not quite as touching as that. And
I don't need compliments, obviously, as we've already digressed.
He wouldn't know what to do if you complimented him.
Do you know, one of the biggest takes, I think, was, so I said before that, like, I've never really borrowed any money. It scares me.
That was going to be mine.
Yeah, but to say, when you said about there's good debt and there's bad debt, I was like, actually there is. And I feel like actually maybe at times I could be holding our business back by not going forward and just... Well, I don't know why I'm so reluctant to borrow a bit of money. I don't know what it is in me, but
it's a good thing. It's backing yourself to progress something that you want to progress. That'll happen quicker if you
that's it. And I feel like I've maybe struck myself in the foot a couple of times. Then when you worded it like that, it was just like a little light bulb went on, and I was like,
just don't do it through a loan shark. Make sure it's through an actual, official, legalised system.
Yeah, and I would probably say that's mine as well. I mean, Dad said that we are fortunate that we have very little debt at home, but it's because the three of them can't normally decide where they want to spend the money, so they don't spend it at all. Yeah. So they haven't really invested. So I've been brought up that you shouldn't have debt, and you should own, your car, you should own your phone, you should own your house, you should own everything. Yeah. But actually, hearing from you guys, it's possible to do it with good debt, and that's actually what could drive your business forward. Yes. As you've just said, Hannah, it could actually be holding you back. Yeah.
There's no better feeling than seeing that final payment go out on various things, and
next it'll be a shed.
Well, next it'll be the shed, but that's slightly longer. But just recently, in terms of short-term debt, I borrowed some money to buy 20 shipping containers on 3 years, and that finished 2 months ago, and it was absolutely brilliant to see something paid for that's paid for itself. Yeah. And I haven't had to pay that. The business that they brought in has paid that debt.
Amazing. So that's everything. That is a business working well. That's to be fair.
Yeah. Well, look, guys, it has been a really great evening. I think, Luke, you would agree. Hopefully you've learned a lot too.
Absolutely, and I think it's been really great that you've been so open, because one of the most resilient things we can do is talk to each other.
Especially
so everyone
in a room full of farmers
absolutely,
as well.
Everyone here is grateful for it.
Yeah. So thank you ever so much, guys. It's been fab talking to you, and best of luck with everything.
Thank you
for having us.
Thank you very much.
Oh, Luke, it was such a fantastic evening, wasn't it? And for me, it was really special to be on stage with my wonderful dad, Richard, and actually getting him to open up a bit. I think, the older generation of farmers don't really do that. So, yeah, it was really special and just a great evening.
I agree, Bizza. I was stood at the back and it was fantastic to watch. And Ollie and Hannah were both fantastic guests on our podcast. But now, let's hear from our Westminster team, who will tell us about their work in the world of politics.
Hi, welcome to the NFU in Westminster segment. My name's Olivia Phoenix and I'm Head of External Affairs, and I'm joined by my colleague Ruairi.
Thanks, Olivia. Hi, everyone. Absolutely delighted to be here on the NFU's inaugural episode of our podcast.
So we're the External Affairs team. We are the eyes, ears, voice of the NFU in Westminster. And while we might currently be in Westminster, no MPs are at the moment because it's party conference recess. What that means is that there's no business, no parliamentary business, no pieces of legislation, no debates happening at the moment because all the parties and their MPs are heading out to various convention centres across the UK for their party conferences. When this podcast goes live, we will be in the throes of the Labour conference up in Liverpool. But earlier this week, we were at the Lib Dem conference in Bournemouth. And Ruairi, you were there. What were the NFU doing there?
Yeah, no, so we were there. So we joined the MPs and all of their staffers and bag carriers as they take the opportunity to drink room temperature wine in Bournemouth. I mean, it's important for the NFU to be there, first of all, to show face, show that we care about them. I took the opportunity as well to meet a lot of MPs that, it's people that you might have emailed before, but it's one thing have a relationship with them when you see them in person. So use the opportunity to get to meet them. We actually held a breakfast event when we were there, so we had the Great British Breakfast. All of the produce was English, I have to add.
And we ran out of food. It was in such high demand.
It was, yeah. I did at one point, I was looking around, I saw one sort of measly gluten-free roll that was left, but even that was very quickly snatched up. But
yeah,
so
we're normally left with vegan rolls, aren't we? To say. They're not the most popular at NFU events.
No.
Even with the Lib Dems.
We did get one, and I said to one of the staffers as well, we will have some vegan produce there, and they said that's very open-minded of you. But no, so the event was really well attended, I thought. But no, I really enjoyed it. I didn't necessarily go in with many expectations. I felt like we were very well prepared for our event. We had a lot of people saying that they were attending. There was a lot of interest.
So apart from coming to get all the delicious breakfast food, the delegates obviously wanted to have some conversations. What conversations did you have with people who came along to our Lib Dem fringe?
They're very varied, I have to say. Some of them came in and they were from their own organisations, and then they had quite an in-depth knowledge on certain aspects, whereas some of them were just lay party members who wanted to come have a chat about British farming. So there was one woman who I was speaking to, and the first thing she just asked me was, are we going to get the inheritance tax sorted? So obviously you have a conversation about the family farm tax and the work that the NFU are doing around that. Another one was on abstraction licences. There was a chap who was there who I had a conversation with who was really interested in right to roaming rules.
Oh, I think I might have spoken to him too. I had a long conversation with someone about right to roam, which we know members feel very strongly about. So it was a good opportunity for us to make it clear what our position is, and also how we can sort of work with others who don't necessarily agree with us, but find a way forward that is beneficial to both. We also had loads of MPs there too, which was great, which again, the Liberal Democrats have a huge number of MPs now. So to get them along to our breakfast, again, shows how much of a sort of target stakeholder group we are for those, for the Lib Dems.
So, Olivia, we're at the Labour conference this year. What is it that we are hoping to get out of it?
Well, so we will be at conference in Liverpool. The great and the good of the Labour Party will be in Liverpool with us. And we go there because we are taking, again, as we always do, that voice of the farmer to the heart of policy and decision makers. We need to be in the room when those discussions are happening, and we need to make sure that the voice of the farmer is represented. So we do our own events there where we convene people who are interested in our sector, and maybe not as interested or not as engaged, but we engage and talk to those people to put across why farming is so important, not just to rural communities, but to the wider economy as well. We will also go along to other fringe events. So when there are discussions happening that might impact farmers, discussions on planning, on infrastructure, on energy, on those kinds of things, we'll have a farming representative in the room who's able not just to listen in and feed back, but able to contribute. And if people want to have conversations, sometimes they're quite difficult conversations, but the point of it is that we can, try and find a point of agreement and look to build relationships, because it's not also just important to remember, it's not just the MPs and the politicians in Westminster. Actually, the sort of more local or closer to the ground politicians, councillors, and other Labour delegates, they have an influence on the policy that shapes our members' farms in local authorities, in the county councils. So it's really important that we can engage with all those people in one go, which is why we're up in Liverpool. And Sir Keir Starmer timed his reshuffle terribly for the party conference scheduling, but we are fortunate to have the new Secretary of State coming along. Ruairi, what do you think we'll get from the Labour conference this year?
So, well, I think it'd probably be good to explore what, like you mentioned the reshuffle. What does that actually mean for our members in terms of, like on the farm gate, you've got these personnel swapping their seats at Westminster. What does it actually, what does it entail? How does it affect us?
So we're in a fortunate position because we've got off to a really good start with our relationships. Our President, Tom Bradshaw, met both the Farming Minister and the Secretary of State twice in their first week and in their first days of the role. So we're off to that good start. But I understand, you might remember that infamous Cabinet Minister Michael Heseltine. His advice, I understand, to new Cabinet members or ministers is to focus on one thing that you want to get done. Now, despite the Chancellor's best efforts, we did enjoy a strong relationship with Emma Reynolds' predecessor, Steve Reed, but his very clear priority was cleaning up water. Now, I think our new Secretary of State, Emma Reynolds, her priority seems to be at the moment is very much growth. That's obviously a government priority, but for our sector, that's really positive. We want to grow the domestic food manufacturing sector, which obviously farming plays a really important role, with a bedrock of that sector. So I think there's a real opportunity for us to build that relationship and build feed into her as much as possible how we see farming playing that pivotal role in growth, in food growth, in rural growth, in all of that. Farming can play that really important role. And we actually had her out on farm. She went to our Deputy President's farm, David Exford's farm, and that was to launch the new role of the Tenant Commissioner. But there was also an opportunity for David to talk about some of the other priorities for us as the NFU. And we were delighted to host that visit. The NFU were asked, the CLA and the TFA came along, but it was us, the NFU, that were asked to host that. We're trusted partners. They know that they can get clear guidance, clear asks, and that we'll put our issues across to them in a fair way. So we're really pleased to do that. But we also have a new farming minister, Dame Angela Eagle. What do you think of her, Ruairi?
I remember when she was put in place at the beginning of this month, she actually got a lot of flack from certain quarters for her previous track record in Parliament. She has been a member of Parliament since before I was born. So I think she was first elected in 92.
Don't rub it in.
And she'd only mentioned farming a handful of times in that rather expansive period. And so people were saying, well, she's obviously not taking an interest. But when I look at that, I don't necessarily think it's a problem in and of itself. She might not know very much about farming, but it means that she's not coming with any preconceived notions about how it actually works. So we're not going to, and they could be wrong, those notions, which you often find for a minister who comes into position, they think they know about a field when they don't. We would, if she did, we'd have to spend a lot of time unpicking the threads of that, tapestry of ill-conceived notions. We're just not going to have to do that. So it could go either way. It could actually be quite a good thing. It's a blank canvas that we can work with.
Yeah, and I think, as I said, we've already met with her a couple of times. And also this week we had Dame Angela out on farm with us as well. We went to a horticulture business and one of our NFU members hosted her, and we talked about the challenges facing that particular sector around seasonal workers and, again, a real sector for growth. We have such a small domestic production of fruit and vegetables, so there's a real opportunity for growth to grow more of that here. And so that hort business was able to set out really well, where the challenges were, but also where the opportunities were. So I think she's definitely still in listening mode. As you say, sort of starting from a blank canvas can be a really good thing, but she also has experience in government, which sometimes is more important, because that's how you grease the wheels, how you get things done, how you sort of demand civil servants take action, which it seems like can sometimes be the more difficult part of the ministerial job. But I think we're off to a good start, I would say.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's not necessarily just the policy area, it's also how to drive the car that is the department and get things actually happening. It's like you could have a good idea about your policy area, but if you don't know how to enact the changes you want to do, you're not going to be much use, are you? So,
And Defra is an oil tanker. It's a big car.
But as well, because she came to our food resilience roundtable as well that we had at the beginning of the month.
Yes.
How did that go?
That was really good. So our president, Tom Bradshaw, hosted a roundtable. We had nearly 20 organisations, businesses from across the food supply chain. So that's retailers, that's producers. We also had some of our farming members there too. And she came in her second day in the role. She listened to all the concerns and again the opportunities that the sector was setting out. And it was really clear that the whole sector wanted to work with her to find ways forward. We didn't come with just a list of complaints. We came to be collaborative partners, which again I think sort of sets us apart. And the fact that the NFU convened that again demonstrates that power that we have. And this week we've then sent off a letter to the farming minister in collaboration with those organisations. Again, it's strength in numbers. It's sort of the first rule of lobbying is that once you're bored of your own message, it's only when people are starting to listen. But the second is strength in numbers. So I think we'll just keep banging the drum on the opportunities for growth for our sector and the things that government needs to do to help farmers and food and the food sector more widely, but then doing that in partnership with these huge big businesses is what we hope will get the change.
Thank you very much, guys. It's always great to have an update from Westminster. And it's also really good to know that our lobbyists are there giving us all a voice as farmers and asking the difficult questions of politicians. But now this next feature needs some explaining. We first lined this up as a light-hearted chat about a ranch in California that was scaring off wolves by playing AC/DC on drones.
But as soon as we started talking to Mary from Prather Ranch, we could see this was a much more serious issue than other media outlets had realised. Not only are the wolves killing livestock and changing the balance of wildlife, they are also leaving the community feeling scared, helpless and hopeless.
And I suppose what's even more disheartening for these residents is that the wolves are protected in law. So if anyone does hurt them, then they would face a prison sentence or a massive fine. We jumped on a call with Mary, who was a very interesting guest, and she told us the issues that they're facing.
We've now been joined by Mary Rickett from Prather Ranch, a 28,000-acre pasture ranch in Northern California. And she's been experimenting with playing AC/DC's Thunderstruck via drones near cattle herds as a novel deterrent for wolves. Mary, it's first thing in the morning with you, so thank you very much for joining us. And this is a really serious issue for you.
It is a very serious issue, and it's become extraordinarily serious in the last year or so for many ranchers in California.
I suppose we're talking about the predation of wolves here. We don't have wolves in the UK, so can you tell us a bit more about why the wolves are there and what the scale of the issue is?
Well, probably well over 100 years ago, they were exterminated, the wolves that were indigenous to our area in California. We're in the far northeastern portion of California, and there was a reason that they were exterminated. Wolves are kind of the apex predator, and basically they're at the top of the food chain, and including humans. They are can be very aggressive. And interestingly enough, in about 2016, we had OR7, which was a collared wolf, migrate down over the border from Oregon, the state of Oregon, into California. And it was in very close proximity to our northern properties of our operation. We operate in 3 different counties. Some of it's deeded land, some of it's leased. But this wolf came into California, and of course, my husband and I have always tried to be very progressive cattlemen and ranchers. We've been recognized numerous times for our land stewardship practices. And interestingly enough, especially for people in the UK, in 1990, we closed our herd. And so we also raise these cattle for biomedical purposes because of mad cow disease. So everything we do, and we have our own USDA slaughter facility on the ranch. And everything we do is to prevent the possibility of mad cow disease. So it's a very unique herd in and of itself, not just a conventional cattle herd. But anyway, the wolf came across the border, and we had the Defenders of Wildlife come up to see us. And we spent the day with us, and they toured around, and they realized that we were more or less the poster child for very much a difficult situation for us to be able to protect our cattle operation. We have many miles of timberline and fence line, and then irrigated pastures where the cattle are generally. We don't graze up in the mountains. A lot of ranchers in California do on cattle allotments. But we keep our cattle a little closer and a little more controlled and contained. And so initially that conversation evolved. We said, well, how can we protect ourselves and our cattle? And their answer was just bang pots and pans together. Well, we kind of looked at each other and just went, whoa, this is going to be an interesting experience. So for about 8 years, we did coexist with the wolves. And we noticed our deer herd around the ranch and our bear herd. We had a very large bear herd. They'd come in and they would eat. We have a feed yard, small scale feed yard, and they would come in and you would see a lot of bear scats. So you were very aware they were there. But in the last couple of years, those have virtually almost disappeared. And about 2 years ago, the wolves decided, oh, here's another food source. And they started picking off our cattle. And so almost a year ago, when we had a group of 200 mother cows, and of those mother cows, when we got ready to ship them, we had 40 calves missing. We have no idea what happened to those calves. And, as a livestock producer, that's a huge hit to your operation. And especially because our operation is, we can't replace these cattle. We can't go out and buy them. We've been raising them and keeping historical records on them if their byproducts were being used for pharmaceutical purposes. And so that was a real hit. And then also during this time frame, we started losing them. And we have had 20 confirmed kills. And they have to come out and they have to basically have somebody from USDA, United States Department of Ag, verify that it was a wolf kill. So we've had 20 confirmed wolf kills. And so with the price of cattle, and you're aware the price of cattle is really high right now, it's really, really been detrimental and devastating for our cattle operation. So that's how it's evolved. We tried using fladry. I don't know if you're familiar what fladry is, but it's like a long string of flags, colored flags that you hang on the fence line to hopefully scare them away. That absolutely didn't work. We ride in the cattle, different groups of cattle all the time. And there's just nothing to stop them. And once they've more or less gotten a taste of how easy it is, and the other thing about them, and our herdsman always says, his name is Joel, he always says that he thinks that it's the thrill of the kill, and it's called thrill killing. There's actually a phrase. And interestingly enough, he's watched them go through our cows and calves and to a group of yearlings because they're much more sporting. And what they do is they chase them until they're exhausted. Cattle are not built to be runners and to run from the wolf. So they eventually collapse. And then this is where it gets very graphic and unpleasant. But then they attack them from the rear end and generally eat the hind end, the anus area, and their entrails will fall out and they'll lay there in shock. Until Joel, if he comes across them, he has to usually put them down. And so this is not like a mountain lion kill. A mountain lion will initially go for the neck and break the neck, so it's a quick, clean kill. This is really weighing heavily emotionally, financially, and just the health of the people that take care of these animals too.
At home, we have issues with birds of prey, especially
Yes.
herons coming into our fishing pools and taking the fish. So we
Yes.
put dummies up, but they eventually learn that actually that's not a threat. It's a dummy. It's not going to do anything. So surely they'll
Right.
become immune to either the drone or the song. So then what's next? Do you change the song? Do you have to have a different method to try and deter them if they don't listen to the drone?
Well, as much as people don't want to hear this, to me, the most effective, and I'm not a biologist, but the most effective deterrent eventually is you determine which is the most aggressive alpha female. Usually they say there's an alpha female, and basically exterminate the most aggressive animal that's basically leading the pack and wrecking the most havoc. We can't legally haze them even. I mean, that's the problem, is that we don't have any kind of recourse. We don't have the ability to protect our own animals, and it's gut-wrenching for us. It's really gut-wrenching because we feel so helpless.
Have you seen a dip or a decrease in production from your herd?
Oh yes, the fertility up where the wolves are prominent. Right now, we have different groups of other cattle on other properties, and we actually had real good conception rates because we had good feed this last year, and so you can see how the environment does impact your conception rates, and I'm sure you see it in your flock. When you have really good feed and mild weather conditions, they do so much better. And so it's very disconcerting that we haven't made much progress. I suggested to our cattlemen's representative the other day, perhaps they could look at some kind of a formula that if a rancher has lost, so many confirmed kills, that they would be able to have an expanded number of options to protect their cattle, more hazing, more shooting guns in the air, even rubber bullets. But I've been told that the rubber bullets, after a while, they get used to. And it's like, oh, yeah. So they're rugged animals. They are vicious, rugged animals. And yes, they're beautiful. And I understand why people want to go to bed at night thinking, oh, the wolves are out there in the forest and everything's wonderful with the world. But it's not helping us at all as ranchers, and it's a problem, and it needs to be resolved. And we need to educate people as much as we can. This is a whole legacy, a whole tradition of cattle ranching that's being majorly impacted right now. I talked to a friend of mine the other day, and it just broke my heart. We had our local county fair, and she was telling me, she says, Mary, she says, I never dreamt that I would be sending my kids out to the barn packing, meaning carrying a gun. And that's, to send your teenager out with a gun just to go to the barn to feed the animals is our new reality. And it's just not the way those of us in the rural areas want to live.
No.
Leeds University did a study recently which actually looked at the merits of reintroducing 167 wolves into parts of, I think, mostly Scotland. Obviously, in the UK, sheep make up a much greater proportion of our sort of agriculture setup than they do in the US. And you're a sheep farmer yourself, Bizza. I mean, it would have quite an impact on the UK, wouldn't it?
It would have a huge impact. And I think the idea was to control the deer population, but you're not going to have 167 wolves rock up in Scotland and say to them, right, you can only eat deer. That's just not going to happen. The sheep will take a huge hit on that. And my dad and I were talking to someone the other day who had actually been up beating on a grouse shoot up in the Highlands of Scotland, or the moorlands of Scotland. And they have, across 20,000 acres, they have 5,000 sheep that they purely use as basically a blotting paper, and they go through and they go and mop up the ticks, because the ticks are a huge issue for the grouse. So should these wolves be introduced, obviously they're going to go after the sheep, which means that incidentally it's going to have a domino effect on different industries within the countryside. So deer stalking, grouse shoots, and probably more. I can't think off the top of my head. So what would you say to anybody who thinks introducing wolves into Scotland is a good idea?
First of all, I do have some Scottish heritage. So one my grandfather was Scottish and McPhee. So,
Very
and I had a lot of
Scottish.
McDonald's, yes, McDonald's, McPhee's. So I have a little that connection with you. And as I tried to describe earlier in my discussion, is that it's had unintended consequences, undeniably. Just my personal observation, my husband's observations, we used to have literally hundreds of deer where these cattle are and where the wolves are. And when I'm on that particular ranching operation, I go out and I work on around the corrals and slaughterhouse, and there's about 5 or 6 deers. There's a couple of bucks. There's 2 or 3 does and like 1 or 2 fawns, and we actually operate our USDA slaughter plant by solar power. So because we use alternative energy quite a bit in our operations, and so the deer will sleep under the solar panels during the day. Then about 5:30 in the afternoon, they'll walk over and move into the feed barn, a great big feed barn where the hay is. They won't even go out and graze anymore. And those are the only ones that are left. And that's what people don't understand, is they've decimated our deer herd where we are, and the bears have just up and left. Because you can tell where the bears have been. They're not shy about leaving their scat behind. And so I'm all over that place, and there's just hardly any bear scat anymore. So there are this does really impact the wildlife. And then once you get that whole balance off, how do you restore it?
Thank you, Mary. It's a fantastic story, and thank you for sharing it. And we really appreciate how challenging the situation is for you. I can see from the window behind you, it looks like a fantastic day. So I'll let you get on with your day.
Yes, my husband's got some plans for us to go out and do some wood cutting, I think.
Let's get to it then. Yeah. So thank you very much. And if you want to find out more, we'll put some more info in our show notes about what Mary's been sharing.
Well, Luke, we've come to the end of our first episode. How do you feel it went?
What an experience, Bizza. It's been great to hear from such wonderful guests being so open about their stories. And I'd like to thank our guests for giving up the time to speak to us. Make sure you hit the follow button so that you're notified of our next episode.
And just a reminder, we will be back on the 14th of October with episode 2, where you'll have 2 new presenters, Naomi and Josh. But from Luke and I, it's thank you very much for listening and goodbye.